come up with for like the last year. You know, as a music supervisor, a lot of my job involves searching for music, obviously, and I have found there to be some challenges when searching for music and using various companies' search engines and websites, in that there is there's sort of this broad term called urban, which is used as a sort of a catch-all for all things Black music. And so it sort of just kind of got my brain going as to what does urban mean and why is this term used for categorization, and you know, you see it in metadata. So I wanted to bring my colleagues out so we'd have a conversation as, you know, about why is it used, what are the benefits of using it, and what might be some reasons why it may not be useful. Just from my perspective, in searching for music, I find the challenge that if I'm looking for a specific type of music, urban doesn't really help me, other than just to say it's from a Black artist. But I mean, you have such an extensive variety of music that is contributed by Black artists. Just the term urban has not really been useful for me. So I just wanted to have this sort of conversation, and again, it's just me. There's obviously many folks in the industry that might find it beneficial and useful. So I have folks from both sides of the spectrum here to sort of have that conversation. Wenty, we'll start with you. You know, you do have your own music library. You're composing music as well. Tell me what your perspective is as far as the term urban and how it's incorporated in your work, your categorization.
The term urban, if I get broad with it, from my understanding, was coined back in the mid-'70s by Frankie Crocker, who at that point was the biggest DJ in the biggest market in the country. He had a pulse on all things Black music from the station WBLS's point of view. And we've heard, you know, food before us, by us. That he is a Black man. He came up with that term to describe the music, our music, for the masses, and that was to incorporate, you know, R&B, disco, all the quote-unquote Black music of the day. Fast forward to today, circa 2022. I personally think it's a useful term in that, as a music library owner, if I get someone saying, hey, we need country, for instance, right away I know, okay, under country there's bluegrass, there's stuff in the 60s, there's stuff in the 70s, there's Americana, there's all different kinds of country, but because that word, I'm understanding there's pedal steels, there's going to be some fiddles, there's going to be some harmonica, there's going to be a sound associated with country. The same with rock. You know, whether it be thrash rock, punk rock, 50s rock, psychedelic rock, you know there's going to be drums, guitars. There's all different kinds of rocks, but it's going to say something. So urban music to me, when I hear it, whether it's urban tension, urban drama, urban comedy, you know, it's coming from a place where you could tell, for lack of a better word, it's coming from a Black point of view, African-American point of view as far as the music goes, the rhythm, the drums and the bass define it. You know, so like today, hip-hop drives the culture drives hip-hop. They inform one another. Many moons ago, it was rock. You know, we saw that in Woodstock. That rock drove the culture drove rock. It was a reciprocal relationship. Nowadays, it's hip-hop. And that is part of urban, you know, the soundscape. So for me, I find it, as a guy who went to music library, who's got to do music searches for a lot of our clients, when they start with urban, I get an idea of where we're going. Now, in conversating with them, it becomes clear, really clear, who knows and doesn't know what urban is, right? And in at that point in time, I'll always ask for sonic templates, you know, because sometimes the language, if you don't know, like you can have someone grow up in quote unquote urban America who's not well versed in country, right? So you have a lot of, dare I say, white folk who didn't grow up in urban America and don't know all of the neo souls and the Al Greens and all of the different, you know, so I think it's important for me, from my perspective, because it gives me a jumping off point of where to start, and then we work from there.
I think it's interesting to hear Wenty explain how we hear country and we automatically know all the subgenres. And then we also know that urban almost has the opposite effect, right? It's been used as a term to say, these stories are not regular stories, they're for the Black people, and there's really, generally speaking, no real categories under them in terms of when we look for them in libraries and that, where it's literally saying, this is what's under urban. We can maybe think we know, but those who are categorizing this music as such is not thinking about those subcategories when they're designating the music that way. I was a part of Entertainment Tonight Media Insider, one of the first TV programs that will use the Avid Media Player. So when we went to HD, I was the person charged with putting all the music that used to be on CDs, this is how old I am, that used to be on CDs, I had to formulate the metadata for our whole catalog, which literally was a whole room at Paramount Studios. And one of the hardest things was to read the titles that they had given to so much of the Black music or music designated for Black stories. And it was at that time, it was good that I was the person doing it, right? That I had a sensitivity about it, and I could say, hey, Library X, you have a song in your library named this, and this is racist, and you should probably change the title to this, thing. And so I guess I'm saying, when we're talking about urban, we also have to talk about the subgenres, but we also have to talk about the feelings and the moods that go along with them, because they have to be married to the right categories to even go under urban, right?
I was just going to say, from my perspective, so I'm coming from the publisher's point of view, and Kobalt in general, we have probably like 1.1 billion copyrights that we're dealing with. So for me and my team is global, for us, we don't use the term urban. I like you were saying, I think it's a sort of an entry point, and then for me, then what's really important, and this is just with sort of any brief, is like, what are the examples that you're actually talking about, right? So it's like, to be honest with you, I haven't seen a search that has said like, we need urban music, but even if they did, I would immediately respond back to the music supervisor of, what are you talking about? Are you talking about Mary J. Blige in the 90s? Are you talking about, neo soul now? Are you talking about East Coast hip hop from here, this, that, or the other? So it's like, I think, especially if I just think about it in the respects of the daily job, it doesn't really come across my desk. If anything, it actually comes across my desk more when I'm dealing with our A&R and they're trying to sign something, right? But I understand that it can be an entry point. So, for instance, like my team in France, they may get a search that says like they need urban music, but then as they start categorizing it down, they more understand what they're talking about, so they may not be so apt to, I would say, call it out. So that's sort of like the business side of what I think, but I think just sort of in my daily lexicon with my friends, even with my industry colleagues, like, I don't think anyone has ever said to me, like, I love urban music. Right? It just sounds a bit odd to say. You would say, I like hip-hop, or I like R&B, or I like neo-soul, and then we can sort of like narrow it down from there. And I think that this conversation piece, I think it's been around for like us for a while, but obviously, America, the world has sort of had this social reckoning like post George Floyd, so it's been brought more to the forefront because, a week after that happened, I was getting emails from people like, we're going to eliminate this word, like we're taking it out of our vocabulary vernacular. Different companies were saying this, which I think, trying effort to their point, but this was a conversation that was going on a long time ago, right? So I'm glad, first of all, I'm glad that you actually brought this as a panel too. So
Yeah, and I'll just, say that one of the purposes of this conversation is really just to bring it back to folks that work in this industry. Time is always of the essence, and anything that can be done to make a music search faster and more accurate is a benefit to everybody involved, right? If it helps, a licensing company or a publisher land a sync, God bless them. That's good on their end. If it helps the music supervisor land a sync, then hallelujah, right? One less thing to worry about. So this is one of the reasons why we're having this conversation. Obviously, it is a little bit of a hot button issue and we're talking about, but at the same time, it hopefully is a benefit to the workflow in your day-to-day work life. So that was another reason why we wanted to have this conversation. It sort of ties into metadata and how you all, whoever's in the industry, how you categorize your music and how important it is to be accurate in categorizing. And yes, we can start off with urban as being all things Black music, but there are definitely subgenres. And on the flip side of that, if you have an artist who's doing folk music, and I'm going to butcher this name, so you guys help me out, but Joy Oladokin. Yeah, so I apologize if I'm mispronouncing her last name, but she's a singer-songwriter, folk artist. Would she be classified as urban? And if you're doing a search for folk music for a music supervisor for a pitch, are you going to pitch her? Is she being categorized as a folk artist or a singer-songwriter? Or does she not fit because she's Black? So it's just a matter of really opening up, your minds and really doing the research so that if we are talking about being inclusive, we are being inclusive. Angela.
Yes, so to add to that, just, being a music supervisor, I feel like it's really my responsibility to make it very clear cut what I'm looking for. When I'm sending out a brief to a label or a library, normally that brief is about tonality, the tempo of the song. Mainly the lyrical nature for me is what I'm really tapped into in terms of it meeting the needs of that scene. And then obviously, whether it's going to be R&B or hip hop, specifically if I'm looking for a particular genre. So a lot of times labels have their, initiatives and new signs and people that they want to put in front of me. But, that's the hard thing, like she's saying, that you have a specific need. And so when people start to send you their agenda versus what you're looking for, I think that's a little more where the problem lies that I've experienced, because I'm pretty much very direct about the type of style of music that I'm looking for 10 times out of 10. So, you should know your library, obviously, and the music that you have signed to your library. And when you're dealing with music supervisors, you should know how to make sure that you're sending something that's potentially going to land you the sync that you're looking for and not waste time.
As a catalog owner that's built multiple search engines for multiple companies, working with Jim Long, who was initially owned FirstCom, and he had built many databases as well, and his background was in radio. My first job was in radio, and we were very comfortable and aware of the urban genre as a category. So in building production libraries and music catalogs, urban was part of the drop down of a major genre, just like rock, classical, jazz, promo trailers, and a couple others. And I think overall, yes, it's a great way to sort of get you into the ballpark of each genre, depending on whichever one, whether it's urban or rock. You're in that ballpark, but to get on the base, you've got to then pick a subgenre. I want urban hip-hop, or urban rap, or urban trap, urban R&B, neo-soul, versus pop R&B, pop hip-hop like Macklemore and, those guys. Pop R&B like Rihanna. That's how she's categorized in, the music that's in that style is categorized in my catalog. So, then post George Floyd, yes, I got those same, Instagram feeds, why are we using urban as a category? And, in order to be sensitive to that, I did change our genre to just R&B and hip hop. And does it work? Sure, just, it's just now called R&B hip hop / hip hop versus urban. But it is a way, and when you're building a search engine, you really do need to have sort of these broad strokes, and then you have to have multiple genres. Now, do I have drill in there as a subgenre? No, because I don't have that much drill music. Probably have one track in the whole catalog. But, it's a matter of picking and choosing what really fits your catalog. And as an artist, when you're submitting to Crucial, and we make our artists do the metadata, and of course the staff then normalizes it to what the industry what it really should be. A lot of times artists don't know what genre they are. I get this all the time. You have blues musicians who think they're Texas blues and they're really Delta. So it's a matter of knowing also what genre you are really performing in, and then when you're submitting that to people, and then when it's being presented. And I think it's really important for the catalog owner, the producers within that catalog as well, to know what they're listening to. And it's really easy. You get a brief, you go listen to the temp track and say, oh, this is what, even if you've never heard of something, you say, oh, this is what this sounds like. And you don't just listen to the first 5 notes, you listen to, verse, chorus, and figure out what that piece of music is, and then it's a lot easier for you to find it in the catalog.
Yeah, Carolyn, just 1 second. I just wanted to tie into something Chris had said in our initial conversation when you were saying that you had been speaking with a few of your artists and sort of finding out how they themselves identify and how that helps, you and your team to, classify music, when it does go out to music supervisors. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so, when I meet with our artists, obviously I just want to get a sense, mainly just getting a sense of who they are, artistically. And again, this is, for me, it's, thinking about it on the business end, it's how do they identify themselves, how do they identify themselves? But what I really have to do is take maybe the many adjectives that they have about themselves and their sound and their music, but I also need to apply it to my clients, which are music supervisors. So one exercise that our team did was maybe 6 years ago, and now I'm thinking about it and I'm making a mental note that we need to do this again, was we actually reached out to a number of music supervisors and asked them what are sort of the tag words and keywords that they use in their library. And we had a massive, a lot of data, and we just started finding similarities, and that's honestly how we created our tags list internally. So it's great when I meet with artists and they tell me they're this, they're that, they're this and the other, but I always tell them when they leave my presence, I have to be the conduit between, where they want their music with the music supervisors. So I need to then take that, what they told me, and convert it into a language that we understand in this side of the industry for what we do. And I think that that's just very important. And just now I'm just thinking about, I need my team, we may need to revisit this, because in 6 years, so many terms and genres have changed, right? I mean, we can do this entire panel on Latin music. Because right now, I do have a Latin office and I'm dealing with them a lot, and we have incredible artists. I went to Miami, I love the artists, and I got more of a feel of we need to start subgenre. I mean, there are subgenres, I'm coming to this late, but I'm just saying Latin does not mean anything to me, right? So that's a whole other conversation, but to your point, for me it's more how do I get my team, because time is our greatest asset, to take this, to tag it, and to get it to music supervisors as quickly as possible. So, we're trying to nail what their target is.
This ties into what Chris is saying. It seems to me as a music supervisor, catalogs come out from labels and publishers, because a lot of labels and publishers categorize their music in terms of fans of certain artists. And if catalogs took that same kind of thought, and then you figure out, well, how is radio categorizing these artists, then you kind of have at least the ballpark of the subgenres that we're getting pitched, because we're being pitched in terms of how artists are seen in comparison to each other, right? And then we kind of have, at least we're all in the same conversation, I would say. But then there's this thing that we called our playlists. And in 2004, 2005, that lovely thing, iTunes, came along. And we were no longer burning CDs. We were actually able to slide WAV files into these playlists. And they were really mostly done by moods and feelings and story subjects, right? Or sex scenes, the type of scenes. The reason why I named my business Music for Scenes, because it's all about the story or the mood. Can anyone just speak to, beyond urban, how we talk about the scenes or the stories or the moods that we're looking for within urban music, if you will, and how we categorize that? Because in a lot of ways, our subcategories also have to go even more granular to get to those types of things too in the urban landscape, and that's even harder.
Thinking of granular, representation, as I say, matters. So I know when and if I'm dealing in terms of urban music requests, I'm dealing with an Afro-American amateur music supervisor. Their understanding and knowledge of what they're asking for is different than if I'm dealing with someone who's not Afro-American and they're asking for it. They're not nearly as specific at all, which is, it's more broad. We're working with folks of color who are well-versed in the culture and the music. The asks are different, they're more diverse, they're more particular.
Yeah, it just goes to show, I think the term urban can be subjective at this point. So what it might mean to one person may not equate the same, response to someone else. And I think that's why there's this challenge. And again, this all sort of comes down to what is appropriate to pitch someone, and how can you be as accurate as possible. As we were saying earlier, at least from my point of view, urban doesn't necessarily help me because there's so many subgenres and even sub-subgenres that would be, included in that. And so it's just a matter of taking the time really to know the music and being able to categorize it properly in the metadata so that when it's being asked for, it can be pitched. And so I think it's just being able to sort of break that down, much like some of the other genres like country and rock have been able to do. So I guess, one question I throw out to the panel is, for someone who does have a small library, what would be a first step in sort of trying to break that down? It seems like it might be a big undertaking if you have amassed a collection of music. What would be the process of maybe trying to hit those categories so that they can be accurate and pitch, something that's helpful?
If you're starting out and you're sort of trying to figure out what that landscape is, I was just thinking about All Music Guide. They have a very robust categorization for the artists on that site. So you can look up a artist that you've never heard of, and then hopefully that data is coming from the labels, it's coming from somebody, that's accurate, and it'll say this is, this guy does drill. And so then you can listen to that artist and get an idea of what they sound like and what that genre sounds like. And hopefully, not everybody can make the connection. It is a talent to listen to something and then make a connection. Oh, this sounds like this, and this is this genre, and I get it. But that's a great place to start to find out your research of what something sounds like. From a catalog's perspective, when you're working with a supervisor, there are no misunderstandings when they send you a ref track or an artist style. If you say you want something that sounds like, Kanye West, I know exactly what to look for. The vaguest search that I get is I'd like some rock or I'd like some gospel, and then I'm just like, oh God, I don't really want to do this search because I'm gonna get it wrong. If they don't email me back and when I email them and say, well, do you want alt rock? Do you want indie rock? Do you want classic rock? Do you want new wave rock? Do you want dance rock? I mean, when they respond, that's when you can do the search and really deliver what they're looking for. So it goes both ways, really. It's a way of making sure you've got it cataloged correctly, and then also, the supervisors have to take a responsibility as well in really telling you what they want exactly. The easiest way is by naming an artist, and then you have no. And when that happens, that's all I send them. If they're sending me something, they want something that sounds like Rihanna, I'm not going to send them something that sounds like Beyonce, because they're two completely different artists, even though they might be in the same pop R&B genre. So that's, works both ways.
I just wanted to quickly say, I may hit a nerve here, but for those catalog owners that are small and maybe starting to hire BIPOC creators, because we're seeing a lot of people who are just generally looking for a way to have urban music in their catalogs, even though it's not something they specialize in or know a lot about. Hire a consultant. And make sure that you're sensitive about not only how you hire, even your job description can be showing where you really stand. If you don't hire someone who has those sensitivities, but also the expertise to know how you are actually going out. Just because someone is a Black person, you're trying to fill a brief that says we need Black creators, doesn't mean you should be doing that. Like, do you think you should probably call a Wenty who does own an urban catalog and say, hey man, this is not my thing, do you want to work together to create? Or something so that the language between the creator and the catalog owner can be more authentic and not just you trying to appeal to a brief or appeal to some type of DEI initiative or things like that, because we've all experienced that. So I just wanted to also hit on that nerve. Hire a consultant, make sure you're sensitive about the creators you're working with, and give them a say in a lot of things if you can, because they matter. And obviously, if you're going to be in this lane, you should probably hire someone to do this in a way that's more sensitive to the creators you want to work with.
And that's authentic.
Yeah, and that's what I want to talk about, the quality over quantity. Like, there's a lot of libraries that may have urban music, but it's not great urban music. But they added some urban artists to their catalogs. And for me personally, I'm always looking for amazing music, even if it's in a library. So in terms of the labeling of urban and all that, for me it's important that it's great music. And I just think that, that is the biggest thing if you're going to sign urban artists. Make sure, like we said, that the genres are exactly separated in terms of our needs, but that the music is something that I can use. Because I had a library recently, when I sent them a brief, they were like, well, we don't really have any urban music. So they were upfront about that. They didn't try to send me something they thought was urban music. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, and to your point, like, we don't keep track of, at least for me, I don't keep track of when I send out a brief, if somebody doesn't have something, that's fine. Like, not everyone has everything, and to me that's sort of better, because if they specialize in something, when you're ready for that music, that's your go-to, and you know. But I guess let me pose a question to the audience, like, how many people who do work for a label or a publishing company, and who do maybe have a website or a search engine, who do use urban as part of their metadata and genre categorization? Is there anyone here that does?
Don't be afraid. This is a very safe space.
I'm a co-founder of Megatrax Music. JC Dwyer. We pulled the term also off the website, but if someone puts it in as a search term, it'll find other styles, hip hop, R&B. But we took the word urban off of the website.
Yeah, I mean,
and then a lot of albums that are 20 years old, it might be urban or something. We can't really change the title of the album.
and as far as results for you, I don't know if this is something you can speak to, but it's just curiosity. If you're able to track people searching on your engine, how many of those searches have led to syncs?
Yeah, most people don't search with the term urban, they'll use specific R&B or soul or hip hop or neo soul. So hasn't really been an issue. But I think, coming up with all the different genres, like you're saying, that's important, obviously. And I think consulting is also, we have consulted over the years with different people to produce things for us. And I had a question regarding Billboard. Billboard used to have the urban charts. What have they done?
I believe they've taken it down, and it's more categorized by genre. So like R&B will just be the genre. So it's almost like taking a huge umbrella and making smaller umbrellas.
Is that they were always the go? Billboard was
always,
Billboard used to be
the go-to. Yeah, I mean we don't have an across, for what we do in this industry, we don't have an across the board. Everyone agrees that these are the tag words and these are the terms or whatnot. So, I think we all, we do the categories by like a hip hop or a rock, and then again, we can get into the subcategories of things. But I was just gonna say, and again, I'm not coming from owning a music library, but if anyone out there does have a music library and you do have relationships with music supervisors, I would just highly encourage you just to take them to lunch and say, give me how do you categorize your music? Because really at the end of the day, and I'm again looking at this from the perspective of me pitching music, I can categorize things all I want. I know certain genres, I can get down to the nitty-gritty subgenres of things, but does it really help me if it's just me thinking I'm like the music savant? No. I need to be able to talk to Yvette in her language more so than in what I think my language is. And then also too, just for myself or a company, and me having 24 other creatives globally, we all need to speak the same language. So it's yes, I may know way more about hip hop than these super, super, super subgenres than our Parisian office, but they probably would know about electronic music and French disco and those, and I'm like, oh, French disco, and I think I know what it is. But when I actually talk to them, they are going into these, I'm like, okay, I can see why this person is different than this because, they can do that sort of history. So I think it shouldn't get lost that, it's buying and selling. It's selling and buying. You have to know your buyer, you have to know your seller. Especially if you're selling, you have to know how to communicate with the buyer. And, I just think that it just saves time. And again, we don't have a clear-cut language across the board, but trying to understand that from the seller's perspective is very important.
Yeah, and also I was going to say, by decades, the 50s, 60s, 70s, there's 70s hip-hop, rap, 80s and 90s and old school. And like you were saying, there's so many new genres now, and subgenres, trap, et cetera, et cetera.
I mean, gospel, there's traditional, there's contemporary, there's hip hop, so that's a true breakdown.
And I think a lot of people don't, if you say urban, they don't know what, it's like you say, oh, I want some rock music, or I want some urban music.
It doesn't really, if you
No
use
one
it for
knows.
everything, it doesn't mean anything.
It's a catch-all.
Yeah, it's a catch-all.
Yeah.
And that's the point. The point is that if the search just lands on urban, and you're working on several distinct scenes, where do you start?
That could be your whole catalog.
So I think now the taxonomy, we probably have 40 different subgenres under there, if you include all the different decades and so on.
Which I think is the smart way to go, and much like what Megatrax does, and Tanvi with Crucial Music, what has been very beneficial to me in working with you is that there are a lot of these sub-genres and subcategories that allow me to hone in a search as detailed as possible. And again, with the train for syncing moving so fast, the ability to search to the minute detail is helpful, I think, for everybody involved in the process, especially when time is of the essence. If we can go down to hip hop and 90s era hip hop, and then, detail it down even more. I think once we are able to do that, that is certainly helpful when presenting our own pitch as a supervisor to production. And so it's just a matter of, if the ability is to hire someone to do that research, whether it is talking to another music supervisor or just doing some investigating and exploring online, but to be able to build up a proper database, I think that would go a long way for the staff to be able to pitch music to music supervisors, or music supervisors are self-searching on your site to be able to find what they're looking for quickly.
Yeah, I've been hired to curate for libraries before and create playlists, just like your Spotify playlist. They hired me to go in and create whatever I wanted. They let me go and have a playground in their catalog, and if I wanted to do down-tempo, jazz, old school hip-hop, like I went in and had a field day with their music. But they were intentional by bringing me and some other curators in to do that. So that was smart, like you said. But, being a DJ for me, that's like my first thought process. What am I listening to? How do I blend this? What's the categories of music that I'm mixing, right? So for me, that's just how my mind thinks. But I know for a library, when you're just signing all these different types of music and styles, it's not that simple if you're not tuned in like that.
When she said she's a DJ, I just thought about when I first got in the music industry, we literally had to powwow. And the names of our marketing managers was the urban marketing manager. And the urban marketing manager would have a listening session where we all had to sit down and listen to all her urban music. And it was called urban because every week or every other week before release, everybody, even people who were not in the urban department, needed to know what she was releasing so that they could speak to buyers who may have been asking about urban music. And so I know it's old school, but there's this such thing called group listening and just sitting together and listening to stuff, not from the algorithm, but from releases from certain labels or publishers and stuff. They send us these playlists and none of us listen to the whole thing. I'm sorry. Well, listen to the whole thing, but just hearing Angela say, like coming from a DJ's thought, or like when we first got into the music industry, that was a part of your job. You sat there for hours and listened to music. And so we know we can't do that every day, but think about that too. If that's a quarterly thing or something, to just sit down and listen to what every label released in R&B in the last month or 2 months, you're going to get a very good familiarization of what R&B means in this current landscape if you do that. So I just wanted to throw that out.
As far as removing the term urban from the billboard of different libraries, I know post George Floyd there was a reckoning in this nation, but I don't know that it was people of color who were so upset about the word urban. I think there were other folks who felt maybe we shouldn't use this word and we want to take it away. I don't know, like Chris, you said you've never heard someone say, I love urban music.
I've heard it before, but I'm just saying, as of recently, I'm with my friends and just like, I love urban music.
I've never heard someone say, I hate the term urban.
Yeah.
And the way I still look at it, it's like, I think it's a matter of education, okay? It really comes down to education, because when you say rock, you think of all the subgenres. No one has any problem with that. When you say country, all the subgenres. All of a sudden, when it's urban, we don't know what it is. That's a lack of education.
Yeah.
I know what it is. You know what it is. I think everyone on this panel here knows what it is. Now, for the people who don't know what it is, like you said, you need to hire people who can help you to show you what that is. I mean, there's certain musics. I mean, we've got over 250, 300 genres in our library, right? So we work with a lot of stuff. There's some things, someone said we need some 12th century Chinese music, for instance, right? I don't know what that's about. We have to get someone in to help us out with that.
I just want to quickly bring up the explosion of Afrobeats music and Afropop and Amapiano and all of these things. Not even we know all of the, as black as we are, all of the different things that are coming out of these African countries. And there's West Africa sounds so different from South Africa, and so different from the Eastern countries, and I'm like, I give up. I don't think this is all Afro beats, but y'all tell me.
It's like East Coast, West Coast.
It's East Coast, West Coast. Like if you can think about the largest continent on the earth, it's East Coast and West Coast.
Yeah.
And so we're also going through this reckoning, if you will, of educating ourselves and not generalizing all music coming out of Africa as Afrobeats, because it also is coming up with names that we can't even pronounce, but we need to be able to say that's what they're looking for. So I just also want to say this is not just a us versus them, we're also learning to how to categorize correctly as we move into this global thing.
Yeah, I just want to say it's just a matter of respect, really. It's a respect for music, it's a respect for the artist, and again, as far as a job as music supervisor, it's a respect for the production that we're working for too. So I think that's ultimately what it comes down to.
Respect
It's a
the
little
culture.
Yeah, sorry, I was just gonna say, it's just a little bit of like just where we are, taking the time, as you said, to respect. It's like, you know, we could get in a whole conversation on why you need to pronounce people's names right? But also too, there's an education on, like, it's okay to be called out, so to speak. I mean, I can't think of a better term, but to learn from that. So if we're talking about music from Africa, we've signed artists from across Africa, and I had to ask Mr. Easy, like, do you want me out there just saying this is Afrobeats? What'd you do? And he's like, no, we just went off and had like a sort of a musical conversation about like where his influences came from, this, that, or the other. And then I got a little bit better sense of like, okay, so when I meet with my team and it's like, someone's like, oh, it's Mr. Easy, we'll just do Afrobeats. And I'm like, no. There's like this certain genre that he said that he deals in, or this, that, or the other. Or we have another band, Co, who like, they do, I don't even know how to describe what they do. They make their own instruments, they make their own sounds. I mean, even if you think of like legendary people like Lakey, like how do you even put Lakey in a category? So this education and this conversation, which I think is good, it needs to be like a dialogue back and forth. But I also will say, and this happens to me every day, tell me, call me out. My friends, if I say like, oh yeah, my friend's like Mexican, and they're like, I'm El Salvadorian. You know what I have to do? No, it's true. I mean, no, it's true. You take a step back and you say like, you know what, you're right. You are El Salvadorian. I need to recognize that you are El Salvadorian. If you're, whatever your name is, it's like, if I mispronounce it, tell me. Because it's like, that's the only way that this conversation continues to happen. It's not people saying like, this needs to happen, even if it's a conversation about urban, like, I mean, if we all, like, I'm like, I don't really, if people want to say urban music, but there's other people that really take like heart and offense to it, and it means other things. So it's like, this is going to be an ongoing conversation. This can be whittled down to many other things. But I would just say, always just approach it with an open heart, open mind. And if you are the one doing the education, allow people to make mistakes and allow them to learn from those mistakes. Get on the soapbox.
There you go.
I think to Chris's point, you know, at the end of the day, it's really just communicating. I mean, music in itself is subjective. One person's going to like something, the other person's not going to respond to it at all. So we can't assume that everyone is going to be in agreement, you know, on all things music, you know, one way or the other. But again, it's just having a dialogue about it and to understand it and to have a respect for it. And so that was one of the reasons, you know, for having this panel. We do have about 15 minutes left if there's anyone that has any questions for us right now.
I don't really have a question, just more so a comment, just based off of what's going on. Hi guys, Imani. So we talked about commissioning and consulting, but can we talk a little bit more about consulting the right creator for that project? Because not all Black creators create hip hop. Not all of them are good at hip hop. Not all Black creators create R&B. Not all of them are good at R&B. Some of them are better at country. And you can't just go to your one Black friend as a composer and say, I need some hip hop, and you don't get the authenticity that you're looking for. And bringing that to your catalog and trying to expand, do your research on what that person is really good at, or find the right people to do it. Because then we have the issue of PML having these urban catalogs and it's not really authentic. But they're like, oh, a Black person did it. doesn't mean nothing. So until like if they're not really, that's not really what they're doing, it doesn't really mean anything. But can we expand on that, or some of your experiences on actually finding the right creatives to expand on your catalog or to commission some of the work that you guys done or anything of that nature?
I'll be quick. I think I touched on it earlier.
Carolyn, 1 second. Did everybody hear that question? Okay.
What I was speaking about earlier in terms of seeing some of the descriptions that are going out for people looking for people of color to create.
Yeah.
That's all you putting on the description? Just you looking for black people. So maybe we want to say, you're looking for people who do have live instrumentation in their production. You're looking for people who have had placements on major productions. You're looking for people who are classically trained musicians who can read music or that type of thing. Like, don't, even if you're trying to diversify, don't make it about the fact that you're just looking for a black person, because that's what you're going to get. You want to be specific, so those of us who have visions as black people will know, this is for me. I do this, I'm classically trained, I sing, I do this type genre of music, I've had places before, I can fit here, that's what they're looking for. If you leave it open, then anybody who's trying to work is going to respond, and you think that you done found something. But they are not right for the job. So that was what I was touching on earlier, so thank you.
Just to piggyback on that, Carolyn and Imani, after having experiences of receiving pitches and going through music and knowing what we're each responding to, those relationships get built because we have fallen in love with some songs and some music, and we keep going back to that well, and there may be pitches we've received from someone else that doesn't necessarily feel authentic or feels like it's just from an assembly line, probably won't go back to them. It may be worth a conversation, with said company, but who has the time for that? And maybe they have their own niche and they're doing fine. But again, it's like you get a sense of who's really investing their time and resources into the product, and it shows when it comes to us.
Yeah, I have specific libraries that I'm going to deal with, and I have other ones that I'm just probably not going to as much because I'm not finding my needs met there. So.
Hi, my name is Owen. Just on the discussion about the term urban, as an artist and music producer, I'm one of those people that have never really liked the term or would feel a certain way because I think like Frank Ocean even said it one time where he was talking about he doesn't like his music being categorized as R&B because people listen to it a certain way. When you tell them what it is, they're going to already start comparing it to this artist and this artist and this artist under it, and might not be able to hear it in the way that it's supposed to be heard. So there's been times that I've done music that is, I can't categorize the genre. It's genre bending, all that. And people hear the music. I'm talking to friends of color, other black friends, whatever. And they have considered my music R&B or hip-hop, certain songs. And now they're like, okay, if this song was done by a white artist, would you have considered it hip-hop? Every friend I've asked has sat there like, no. I'm like, that's the problem. That's happening with where I feel as a black artist, no matter what, we are going to get tagged as urban or a hip-hop version of everything else, while if it's like an MGK or somebody, he can do hip-hop and it's hip-hop. And then he can go and do punk rock and it's punk rock, not urban punk rock. But if he was a black artist, we know exactly what it would still be categorized as with the Grammy nominations, all that stuff. So I'm just speaking from my perspective, just like, this is why some of us who are like artists who might have came from hip hop backgrounds, but have branched off, like Tyler the Creator, other people have, into all kinds of other forms. And Tyler the Creator had a problem with it too. He said the same thing. He was just like, I consider this album pop. And everyone knows that Igor album was done by Justin Timberlake. It would have been pop. It's pop, this whole thing. So I think the struggle that we as Black artists are often having, those of us who are beyond just any genre, we're having the issue of just like people not really hearing us for the purity of it because we're already categorized in this space. And so no matter what, they see the color of my skin automatically compared to Kendrick, J. Cole, the Anderson .Paak, so-and-so, and so-and-so, when my influence is the Beatles on this song. My influence is Pink Floyd, but they don't even hear that when they see.
So that's the bigger conversation about Black music becoming popular. And once it becomes popular and mainstream, Beyonce's not R&B anymore. Her first album was R&B. Rihanna's not R&B anymore. Her first album was R&B. They're pop stars now.
Yeah.
But they're Black women singing popular music.
What you're talking about is age old. It's a dynamic that's been baked into the system since the beginning of the record business. This started when not to get saucy, right? But the word rock and roll was a euphemism for sex. People in a car rocking and rolling, right? Back in the 50s, they loved this music, they loved the rhythm, they didn't want to see our black faces, right? So they got the Elvises, and that goes into Justin Timberlake. The whiter you are, the blacker you sound, the further you go, right? So when Michael Jackson, when he sold some 10 million albums with Off the Wall, and he was pissed because he won all these Grammys, it was considered R&B. And he had all this crossover success with Rock You, all his other songs, but he was considered a black artist. Now, obviously, he changed that, he crossed over. Prince, one of the smartest guys ever to do it. When he got into the game, when he signed his deal with Warner Brothers, he knew right from Jump Street, I'm not going on the Chitlin circuit. I don't want to be known as a black artist. I want to be known as an artist. This is why after his first hit, he took a hard left and did something like Dirty Mind. It's like, you're not going to pigeonhole me. After Purple Rain, Around the World Today is so different, you're not going to pigeonhole me. That was one brother who understood how this landscape is, and it's unfair, but that's unfortunately the way it is.
Well, it's our brains, we want to make connections. It's how we do things in general. Like, we categorize things. Like, we can't get away from that. And one of my top artists that's a hip hop top licensing that we get, he's Asian. But I only know that because I've met him. And when he submitted, all artists that submit to our catalog, I'm not asking them what their color is. I'm taking their music because it sounds great. It sounds fantastic. It sounds like this. It's going to fit the spot, right? So when you submit to us, we don't really care what you look like, what your sexuality is, none of that. The music speaks for itself. And an Asian guy can make the best hip hop and get licensed and make tons of money each year from me. So I get what you're saying, but it's just like Wenty said, it's inherent in the way we make connections to humans, other humans. It's like, oh, you sound like that, got it. I kind of got the frame of reference now. Otherwise, if you don't have that frame of reference, well, you're gonna have to play it for me. Otherwise, I'm not gonna know what you're talking about. It's frustrating, but it's how we work.
I just want to quickly kind of also play devil's advocate. It is systemic. They did used to have the urban marketing manager go around with the black rock band, even though they were purely rock. I won't name names, but ain't not one of my friends even knew the name of that band. And every show that they did had every other color but us there. But the urban marketing manager had to do all their radio, all their meet and greets, and everything because they were black. And now that was 20 years ago when I was working for the labels, but it was systemic. It was blatant.
Yeah, there's the urban music marketing departments, MCA, urban music.
Period.
Which are smaller budgets, smaller tour support. Way
Listen,
smaller.
we would be doing, we would see that they would send certain things to the print shops, but I would have to do it at the marketing branch, the same creative for the urban artists, because they had a larger budget. So I became the Kinko's, you know, putting flyers on the stuff, cutting flyers, and when we had displays for independent record stores and stuff like that, making posters. I was a print shop for the urban marketing managers, but the other acts had a budget for me to send it off, and I still got to pick up the same order. So,
Their budget's always been smaller, it's historical.
It just goes to show that there's been hurdles historically, there's still hurdles today. It's still worth having a conversation about. Madonna, do you have a?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, listen, I've struggled with it my whole career, trying to do searches, and you can put out one word and it's gonna mean 10 different things to 10 different people. And then I sort of learned from sitting with artists that I shifted the conversation, because I used to go like, what genre are you? And I kick myself now. My favorite conversation is, who do I file you beside? And I'm so excited by the answers I get back, because I want it to be unexpected, and I want it to have nothing to do with what the person in front of me looks like. That speaks to Joy. That speaks to Michael Kiwanuka. That speaks to so many artists. Not only does it teach me something about what the music is about, it teaches me something about the artist. It gives me insight when you talk about the inspiration. I want to know what the inspiration is, more important than the genre, because if I understand your inspiration, I have a better idea of how you'll help me tell a story. So I get so excited when I get a blast and it says file beside. I'm like, okay, now we're talking. Because this has nothing to do with the artist. It has to do with the song. It has to do with the music. It has to do with the story. I don't care about genres anymore. I will put any genre in any scene, anytime, if it's the right song. It doesn't matter.
A nice way to summarize the panel. So thank you for that.